We've said that we're more than happy to do like a 7-year warranty on the epoxy and the hull and the structure of the boat. No problem. We've got no issues with that whatsoever.
It's 2026 and we're back here at Blue Water Boats to check out this latest wide beam boat built by Blue Water, and we're going to find out some of those in and out questions around the quality of the steel, the warranties and everything like that that people have been raising their concerns about online. Let's go and meet up with Kit and see what he says. This is nice. It's like a hotel. Oh yeah. Spacious, modern features, the design work. It's really incredible. It looks lovely. And the galley area, but of course the mandatory wine chiller. But we're not going to talk about every in and out and every cupboard of this boat. This video is about quality, costs and warranties. Here he is. What are you up to?
Well, just finishing the final touches, making sure everything's clean, tidy. And again, we just want to make sure that the paint is what it's meant to be. Lately, there's a new group been formed, which is all good in theory. You know, I do agree with a lot of what they're saying. So this is the Canal boat for change and endorsed by Wide Beams and Wellingtons. We've been trying to engage with them as much as we can, try and give our opinions. Some they like, some obviously they don't. And we agree with some of their things, and obviously quite a lot we don't. The thing with the boat building industry, it's not like a car industry, it's not like any other industry. It is a small cottage industry. We rely heavily on skilled labour. I mean, there's no robots that can make these. Yes, we've tried to invest in machinery where we can, but you know, the boats are pretty much 95% hand-built. We're reliant on skilled labour, which is getting harder and harder to find, more and more expensive. And as this group is pushing for bigger warranties, better warranties, the quality has to go up to do that, you know, which you know, we're fine with that. We've always done that and we've always offered warranties, but you know, it does come at a cost. So one of the comments I've made about is some of the hard to reach areas, some of the little areas, like for instance this, we never used to put a rail across the top of this. It's only because most customers want canopies. The customer expects that canopy to be watertight, but the canopy people, no disrespect to them, they haven't come up with a solution of sealing their canopies down. So it comes back to us to put something on to stop the water getting in, which you think, oh, that's no big drama, but it all takes time. And one of my biggest issues is, you know, we've got this, you know, it's not just putting the strip on, trying to keep it as straight as you can, it's quite small. You've got to weld it so the heat distorts it. But then obviously shot blasting small areas is not easy, and trying to build up the paint thicknesses on these type of areas is really difficult. We use big airless sprayers to get as much paint on as possible. A big airless sprayer onto a small edge like that is almost impossible, is what my opinion was. So I've said this openly on the Facebook page. They sort of laugh it off and say, well, no, every area should be the same. There's no reason. Why can't you get the same build-up of paint there? Is that obviously on the big cabin sides, very simple, easy to do, you know, big long areas. But you're spraying down directly onto these small edges. The spray's hitting this. It's very hard to keep a really nice finish when you've got a lot. Very easy to get runs and sags because you're putting too much paint in one area. The same with all these corners. You hit that, and then you can't stop there. Paint's going to go on there. Then you hit that again. If you're not careful, you get too much paint, it starts to run and sag, and then you get different complaints. I've seen comments that the builders don't care, they're not bothered. I mean, that's an utter load of rubbish. I mean, you know, nobody would go into a business and not really care. Obviously, we all charge different, we all do different processes. We are more top end, so yes, which you think is great, but we're the ones who are looked at even more so because we shot blast, we tell people that how good our system is. But as soon as we get a bit failing, and it might be just on one tiny area, but you know, to them, that's corrosion. I've told them that it won't corrode because we've shot blasted, we've put the 2-pack epoxy high build primer on, we put an epoxy finishing primer on, we've even put a 2-pack acrylic urethane paint system, then we've put a clear coat over the top. So of course, you know, there isn't much more you could put on it. But there will be small areas where it's really, really difficult. I mean, if we test this, it's actually better than I thought. But obviously, you know, we're trying our best. You know, we want to be able to give these warranties. So we got, you know, I mean, 176. I mean, obviously, can't get. It's this edge. I mean, if you drag a rope or something along that edge, or just catch it with your shoes, you know, it's going to get damaged very, very easy. Now, you know, we've only put that on because of somebody else's issues, and yet we'll get the complaints. But you know, I mean, on the top, let's have a look. I mean, 145. So you know, straight away. I mean, paint manufacturers, you know, everyone's different. I can't even get them to do an inland specification. The only paperwork for this paint is for a super yacht that goes to sea in salt water. So, you know, it's well over our spec, but they'd be probably saying 200 plus microns, I would say, but I can't get anything in writing off the manufacturers. I do understand what the group is all about, and, you know, they obviously had paint falling off, which is totally different to what I'm talking about. I'm talking about small edges, hard to reach areas. I mean, it's like this strip, we put this on so that it deflects the water over, so, you know, not so much water goes in the locker, which is great, but, you know, they're not easy to paint, you know. I mean, if the olden days where you brushing, you know, most of it, maybe you can get under there, you get the edges a bit more, but you get brush marks. You won't get a finish like this, brush painting, unless you are really, really, really good. And again, but you'd have to put so many layers of paint on to get the finish like this. You'd have to charge double the amount for the paint system. This is what's so difficult about it, is trying to get the cost to how much labour you're putting in. We don't care. I don't care if I build a boat that takes 12 months, 2 years, 3 years, 5 years. If you're paying what it costs us to build, we can do it to any standard you want. But it's like anybody, you don't go to work to earn no money. You know, we have to charge what it costs. And not everybody has the same budget. So in my opinion, that's why there is different builders. Some do a cheaper version, some do this, some do that. Not everybody wants to work to this standard. You know, when I set up my business 24 years ago, my aim was to do a very, very high-end, top-end product. So that's why I've started blasting. We've been doing this nearly 20 years. People are now realising after 20 years that, oh God, these boats aren't lasting, the systems aren't right. The system's here. We've been guaranteeing our boats for 7 years under the waterline for years. Not everybody, A, realises that, or B, can afford to that's not their budget. So when they keep talking about these issues and whatever, we don't have these issues. Now, I'm not saying every boat we do has no problems or no issues, but, you know, painting really, touch wood, we very, very rarely have any issues because of what we do. But obviously that comes at a cost. So again, now we're sat at the bow of the boat. Again, you can see there's some more small edges, small bits that's been welded, ground off, linished, all by hand again. So again, these are the sort of areas that, you know, you're going to have ropes coming off these bollards, could catch on this edge. So again, it's another prime area where, you know, it can get damaged very easily. Which again, you know, it's not going to corrode because you've got primers, you've got all sorts, but again, the paint will rub off, you know, it's probably going to weigh about 30 tons. So if you've got a rope onto the canal bank or river bank, onto your bollards and rubbing against it constantly, you know, there's no paint system in the world that's going to have that much wear and tear and not rub off, especially on edges. So, you know, there is limitations to anything in life. Again, here, you know, the customer is actually having a canopy at the front as well, which wasn't on the original specification. Obviously, at that point, it was too late to weld anything onto the boat because we'd blasted it, epoxied it, and we didn't want to damage it at all. So because of the canopy, obviously the canopy people, again, they couldn't stop the water getting in, so we've had to deal with it. So we've put this stainless steel angle along, obviously much better because it's stainless steel, it's not going to rust or corrode. And then the canopy will butt up against that, so any water should run off. The customer asked us to deal with it and we found a solution to deal with it. Again, it's not really our issue, it's more down to the canopy, but you know, we worked well with the customer, we discussed it and we came up with a solution. And that's what I think with this group, every boat build is different, every boat build is different, every customer's different. This boat is 2 months late, and there was obviously a lot of extras gone into it after the specification was done. Even at the boat show at Crick last year, met up with the customer there. He's added the water freedom to it, you know, which, you know, he said it at the show, good idea, great idea for wide beams especially, so you haven't got to try and get water on board all the time. But it's things that add to the build as you go through. It was quite a considerable amount of extras and cost, which we could sort of justify, you know, probably a month's extra work. And obviously, when it is extras and stuff like that, people think, oh, well, it's just an hourly rate, somebody working, but obviously it's not. We've got our overhead costs, we've got the buildings, we've got all the extra materials and that, so, you know, it does have a knock-on effect. And obviously the boat that we should be working on, we're not working on because we've still got staff on this boat. So it's not just an hourly rate for somebody to fit some extra bits, you know, it does play havoc with your build schedules, your costings and everything, you know. So this customer's been good as gold really, he's accepted that, you know, he wanted some extra bits, it's added to the time scale, which is why he was, you know, he just wanted his boat right. But like I say, if it was a different scenario and the customer was desperate to get on because of where they had nowhere to live or whatever, they'd have been putting all sorts of pressure on us to build that boat quicker. And even, you know, we've had customers say to us, well, you're going to have to pay for us to stay in a hotel because it's late, and, you know, but it's these extras that do take time and do cost money. And, you know, we don't want the boat to be here any longer than it has to be, but, you know, vice versa, like this group are saying, you know, they want it right. You know, it really is such a tight line between quality, timescales, profit. So my biggest advice for people on that group is literally, you know, talk to your builder every month, have a discussion about, you know, where we're at, you know, what are the delays, what are the time problems, what are the time restraints. The more open you are, the better and easier it is. There's been other issues mentioned about builders not finishing projects, not sticking to timescales and stuff, or the money side. And that purely is sometimes down to just, you know, builders running out of money and can't finish the projects, you know. So you do have to be so careful. So my advice would be each month, you know, when you're paying that stage payment, check that the work's done. If the work's not done, you know, ask the question why. And then if you pay these builders too quickly, you know, especially now when the industry was booming and you had plenty of cash flow and work afterwards, you know, it wasn't such an issue. But now you have to be very careful that the builder's got enough money at the end of the project to finish it. Because if they run out, you know, this is where all the problems come, and all the, you know, they've got to try and rush the job out because they've run out of money. You know, we're very, very strict now. We've learnt our lesson, and, you know, we've got to make sure probably that one of the biggest payments is the last payment, because, you know, not only this month you got your bills to pay, but next month when the boat's gone, you're still going to have not as many bills, because hopefully most of it's been done throughout the build, but you're going to end up with a few of the last month's bills to pay next month. And, you know, you've got to make sure you can, because otherwise, if there's not a lot of work afterwards, you know, you're going to find yourself in trouble. So it really is a balancing act, and it's not quite as easy as wide beams and Wellingtons quite think, I believe at times, you know. But I think the key to it all is discussing things on a regular basis. You know, things do get behind. It's the nature of the beast, especially if you want to do it to this sort of standard, this quality. And things are changing all the time, especially the electrical side of the boat, which we're going to look at next. So yeah, I think we've sort of conquered the outside areas a bit. We might touch on the epoxy and the structure for that warranty that again, wide beams are sort of asking for. So yeah, we'll might touch on that if we get time at the end. We'll have a look at the electrical side, because that's one of the things that is changing drastically. Week by week it can do, you know, there's so much going on now with the electric propulsion side and electrics. Let's go and have a look. Right, so the driving force behind this boat, the customer wanted to go gas free, but he didn't really want the expense of a generator, which against my better judgment, I must add. Without a generator on board, you are reliant purely on these batteries and the solar, which is great during the summer months, but during the winter, if you use the boat, I mean, it's all right for a customer to say, yeah, I won't use it, you know, it'll be in a marina, it'll be plugged in, but we still have to sell a boat that's fit for purpose. And, you know, like I say again, people asking for warranties, and, you know, the boat has to be right in every sense of the word. So we've got a really good battery system here. For a few different reasons, he ended up going 24 volt. So we've got the 25.6 volt, 300 amp hour Victron lithium batteries. They've been tested and tested and tested. They've got BMS built into them. So yeah, they're really good. We've used them on electric boats, and, you know, this is an all electric, but, you know, this is the same sort of style battery we'd use. They're awesome, to be fair. They charge a lot quicker. Again, life expectancy, nobody will give you an answer, but we've got boats probably 14 years old now with lithium, still going strong. So my expectation is, you know, they don't get used on boats as much as what they would on a car or something like that. I would think anywhere between 15 and 25 years they should last, but they really do the job well. You know, we've got 900 amp hours of battery there, and you can use most of that, whereas, you know, on a lead acid battery you only use half your capacity. So they're really good, but again, they come at a cost. You know, they're not cheap, but they do the job properly. So yeah, going on to the big inverter. So he wanted the 8 kilowatt inverter, which is why we had to go, one of the reasons we went 24 volt to get the bigger inverter in. Because like I say, he's gasless, so, you know, if he is cruising, you know, he's got to use the inverted power to run the hob. What we've had to do to make this possible is upgrade the alternator. So we've got a really good upgraded alternator system, which works with the lithium. First one we've used of this type. We've used others in the past, but this one really is pretty exceptional, which we'll put, I can't go through the whole spec of that because quite honestly my memory's not that good, but we'll put the specification and some key points later on in the video. But it really, touch wood, I think, you know, we've come up trumps with this. It's a real good system, which is why he's managed not to have the generator. So, you know, even if the batteries are getting low, he can run the engine, but with the alternator that's on there, it's going to put a lot of power back into these batteries very quickly. I think the max output was virtually, you know, the same as the small generator we put in. We're not going to get that when it's in tick over, obviously, but you know, it's capable of doing quite a good power output. But with the lithium and this alternator, we're pretty confident that as long as he's not running everything all at the same time, then the system will cope with it. I'm not going to criticise any names, any companies. We're all different. We all do our own thing. But when you're trying to not only do the paint systems to a high spec, the interior to a high spec, you've got an opening roof hatch, bigger inverters. I mean, look at all the master switches we've had to put in, because obviously we've got 12 volts appliances on board because we had to use some in 12 volts, some at 24 volts. So we've had to put droppers in, we've had to isolate all those, they're all individually fused, they're all individually labelled. The work and effort that goes into all this isn't all of it. We've got more stuff for the alternator in the engine room, we've got all the solar controllers. You go into this cupboard here, you've got all your 240 breakers. This is all Lutron. The customer insisted he wanted to be able to turn all his lighting and stuff off through his phone. I must admit he's done a lot of this himself because it's not something we're up to date with, because that's what I say, things are changing so much all the time. These are all the Lutron system there which control all the lights. Then we've obviously got that link to the Wi-Fi. We've had to put boosters in the ceiling and stuff, all hidden away. There's extra bits for the Lutron in the bedroom at the front as well to do all the front area. We're quite lucky the customer's been involved in a lot of this because there is a lot of cabling, a lot of extra bits and stuff that we wouldn't normally put in. You can see here obviously the sunroof is electric, so the opening side of it, and even the blind is electric. But again, you know, to do the job properly, you know, people will just put cable in, but you know, if something goes wrong or you need to isolate it, you know, you need to. All nicely labelled, and it all takes time, you know. I mean, even at every cable, if you look at all the cables, we've got individual labelling on the cable, so it tells you what size cable it is and numbers, so later on, if there's any issues, you can backtrack it. So it's not quite as simple as Y-beams and Wellingtons think at times, you know, which gets a bit frustrating, but you know, this is why I wanted to do a bit of a video on the quality of stuff. And we shouldn't have to justify what we charge, but you know, this is the reason why we charge it. You know, it's a lot goes into it. You know, yes, we could have used some little cheaper like Carlin switches to switch things on and off, but you know, it's all got to be rated. The cable size has got to be correct. If you've got a longer boat, you know, the cables, the longer the cable, the more voltage drop, the bigger the cable has to be. But you'll be amazed when you look in, and you know, on this group, we've heard a lot of people complain about water pumps not working and electrical things failing and stuff. And most of the time, that's why, because the length of cable is just too long, and the cable's not big enough. Every time you design a new boat, if something's happening further down the boat, or you know, that cable has to be changed. So you know, when you're doing bespoke work like this, it's not as simple as like doing a one-off boat. You know, oh, we built that boat 20 times, we know what we're doing, that goes there, dead easy, dead simple. Every part of this boat has been planned, designed, built, gone through with the customer. I mean, even this, so the new systems, so you've got all your normal information, but also he's got all his tanks on there as well now. So we go into levels, all his tank gauges and everything are in there. You've got all your solar input into that as well, so you can monitor your batteries, you can monitor your levels. You know, and it's not just installing it, it has to be programmed. You know, and we're not, we're the first ones to put our hands up, we're not fantastic at all that side, you know. It's, you know, the way things are moving forward, if that's all you do all the time is just deal with electronics and you know, it's easy, it's fine. we may not set another one of these up for another 6 months, you know, and you've got to remember how it's done, and, you know, and it's difficult. It's not as simple as people make out. So, you know, we wanted to do a video on just explaining, you know. I know everybody's job's not easy, but when we're trying to do the steel work to a very high standard, we're trying to do the paint to a very high standard, we're trying to do the woodwork to a very high standard. We do try our best, and, you know, at the end of it, you will get a boat that's going to do what it's meant to do. And that's why we're quite happy to give warranties. If that's what the customer wants, we're more than happy to extend our warranties, but it will be done based on what the customer has. And, you know, everyone has to be sort of, you know, the specification is written up for that customer. So will the warranty. You know, if you've got, you have it all shot blasted all over and underneath, and we put like the epoxy that we want on. You know, we've said that we're more than happy to do like a 7-year warranty on the epoxy and the hull and the structure of the boat. No problem. We've got no issues with that whatsoever. The top sides, like I say, we've got no issue putting a 4-year warranty on the top sides. But there will have to be some, you know, some areas that we just can't physically guarantee. You know, some of the edges, and if they've been rubbed off, you know, or if you've had some damage, or you've hit a bridge, or you've hit trees, you know, we can't be held responsible for everything, you know. But you know, we're more than happy to give a warranty on that paint won't just start to peel off or fall off. But, you know, there is a certain criteria that you have to meet for me to do that. If you pay to have it shot blasted, can't do it for free. Nobody else does it for free, so why would we? So if you have it shot blasted and we put the microns on that we're supposed to do, we're more than happy to do these warranties. They are there if people want them. We've got no qualms about it, and we always have. You know, I'm sure wide beams and Wellingtons will say, oh yeah, we've pushed the builder into doing these extra warranties. Well, no, they've always been there. We just, you know, we don't do a standard boat. Every boat's different, you know, it depends on the budget. You know, this boat's took 9 months to build. 9 months of overheads is very expensive. 9 months of labour is very expensive, and the amount of materials that's gone in is very expensive. You know, so you're looking at over £300,000 for this boat. You know, some people say it's worth every penny and it's great, and I can guarantee it for those periods I've just mentioned. You know, but if you want to sort of take, I don't know, say £50,000 off that budget, you know, you're not going to get the same as what's in this boat. So I can't necessarily guarantee it for the same time. You know, it depends. So that's what I say. You know, and this is what I've tried to explain to wide beams and Wellingtons, that, you know, yes, we can do it, but, you know, every boat has to be individual. The specifications individual to a customer. Why wouldn't the warranty? So yeah, here's another complication we came across. So we've got 2 droppers here, which is 24 volt to 12. Reason being for that, the stove, we couldn't get the pump and that in 24 volts, so we had to run a dropper for that reason. And then we also had the Webasto heater. After discussions with Webasto themselves, they do a 24 volt version, but apparently it's not very reliable, and their opinion was to fit the standard 12 volt one that we do normally. So again, we've had to put a separate dropper in for that. Again, you can see all the cables all labelled. Another thing that, you know, is part of the RCD in that, you know, anything on a boat should be double insulated, all cables. So, you know, on single strand cables, it's only single insulated. So, you know, all this conduit, to meet the proper regs, to do it properly, anything that's a single cable has to be in conduit. So yeah, again, you'll see that, you know, most of these cables are all in conduit. I mean, that takes hours and hours of putting cables into conduit. But if you want to do it properly to the RCD, any single core cable, it's supposed to be double insulated. So a single core cable only has the one insulation. To make it double insulated, obviously you have to put it in conduit. The amount of boats I see that don't do this is quite unbelievable. You know, they might do the big battery cables, but most other cables, even if they're single insulated, they don't put them in conduit. Is it overkill? You know, we have this discussion many times, but you know, does it, if you want it to meet the right criteria and the RCD and what people are asking for, you know, that's what the ruling says, you know, that is part of the rules. So it's not for a dangerous area, it's not going to chafe, it's all nicely clipped. Is it necessary? Nobody will give you the answer. So we as a company, we have to make a decision, and you know, so to make it conform to what all the rules we believe are correct and safe, you know, so we do put it all in conduit. You know, it takes hours and hours and hours. It's not, it's fiddly, it's awkward. You know, if there is any movement on the boat or whatever, nothing's going to chafe, nothing's going to break through. That's all the solar chargers. So we've got 2 of these for these panels. I'll put the full specification of these panels on later on in the video as well. Try and get the most out of that solar. Again, because he's got no generator on board and he's not gas cooking. So like I said earlier, you know, he's done everything he can to get as much power into the batteries as possible. Again, it's another minefield. If you're not an expert in it and dealing with it day in, day out, every time you put a different panel, or maybe it's not even that, you know, you may have a big roof, but you've got a hatch in the middle of it and you've got to break those panels up. But if you put 2 smaller panels together, you lower the voltage, then all of a sudden you're not going to get the best out of your panels and your systems. Everything on a bespoke build has to be tailor-made individually, which is what takes the time, it really does. So this is the upgraded alternator for the lithium. You know, like I said, it's going to be easier to put the specification up as a separate entity, so we'll put that up for you. It really is so much more goes into the build of these boats than a standard boat. It's incredible, really. The exhaust lagging, more nicely done, even the ends nicely patterned. All your plumbing's marked up, you're hot and the cold. So if you do have any issues later on in life, you know, it could be 5-10 years down the line, but it's quick and easy your cables are marked, your plumbing's all marked. It's little things like that other people just don't bother with. All the pipe we use, it's all proper marine grade hose, reinforced hose, stuff that's going to last. You know, even where we've clad all the side with the timber, you know, it's not cheap ply. I mean, that's Hexideck. It's probably, I don't know, 140, 150 quid a board. You know, and look, it's everywhere, you know. If you want quality and you want quality to last, you know, it does cost, unfortunately. You know, in another 10, 15 years, it'll still be looking like this, you know. So when you do come to sell it, you know, you get good money back on it. The heater on the corner there, nice, compact, you know, again, nicely lagged all the exhaust. Again, you can see the angle of that. So any water or anything that comes up, you know, it's going to drain overboard. Get all the plumbing, we've got an accumulator tank there. We put accumulator tanks on the heating system, we put an accumulator tank on the hot water system, and we put an accumulator tank on the cold water system. So you're keeping the pressure there, so when you have a shower, you've got a good head of water, you know, it's all done properly. This here is what we call a mud box, like a sort of weed box arrangement. So water, once it's in there, will flow up to that, and then that feeds the water freedom system. So it's actually taking the canal or river water and going for a big filter system, which we'll show you in a minute inside, which then he can actually use that for drinking water, believe it or not. And it has been, again, well tested, and they've got all the certification for that. So yeah, they're actually using them, which is great on a wide beam, to be fair, because it is sometimes a pain to moor up to try and get water. So he's got rid of that problem. But again, you know, all this has had to be fabricated, put in, painted, installed. And this one's actually a smart system as well, so he can operate it and monitor it all from his phone. So again, it's a great system, but you know, It's all pretty complicated stuff. So yeah, this is the water freedom system that we've had to fit to the boat. Well, to be fair, they've done most of it themselves. To be fair, we've put the mud box that we've just explained, and then that comes into here and goes for this sequence of filters till it gets to the last one. And then I think there's one more filter as well for the drinking water, actually by the tap. And yeah, so it takes dirty canal water, and by the time it's gone through this system and the final one over there, then you can actually drink it. Might not be everybody's cup of tea, but you know, apparently they've done all the testing, so you can only assume that it does what it's meant to do. Great for your shower and your wastewater and everything, and you know, that's brilliant system. You don't have to have the drinking water filters. You can just have up to the, I don't know if it's say to this stage, which will do like your grey water, and then the final smaller filters are obviously for the drinking water. This one's actually a smart system, so I believe you can look at it on your phone. You can program when it takes the water out and when it fills all the tank up and everything. So real good system. This is the first smart one we've sort of fitted, so we don't know all the features yet, but you know, once it's in the water, obviously we can't test it until it's in the water and go through it all. So next week hopefully we'll get to see this working properly. But again, you know, there's bits in the engine room you've got to do. You've got to have room for it, obviously a lot of pipe work to it. Nobody really wants to look at it, so then you've got to build a nice cabinet so it's accessible, because obviously it's going to have to be serviced. But you know, you don't want it to look ugly neither, so everything's all been built into a nice little cupboard so you don't even see it. And again, it's all these little touches that, you know, I think just set us apart from a lot of other builders. One of the other things that's come up on the canal boats for change is steel certification. And they say that every piece of steel is the same. Well, the steel within reason, I agree, can be the same, but the mill scale and how well it's adhered to the actual steel is different on every piece of steel. We can be blasting some and it blasts off absolutely easy. You can be blasting another and it's stuck like, you know, the proverbial. So I don't agree with that statement at all. Not every two pieces of steel are the same at all. They're all different. The only way to guarantee it properly is, like I say, to blast it all off back to white steel. Then we know what paint we're putting on there is going to stick. So that's not a problem. Steel certification, it is possible to get it if anybody wants it. They used to come with every sheet of steel going back 10, 15 years. For some reason they don't anymore, I suppose. Saving paper, saving everything like we have to now in the world, you know. I'm sure we can get digital copies of it if anybody wants it, but in 25 years, nobody's ever asked for the steel certification, so I've never really bothered. They're also talking about the structural side of it. I mean, you can see our boats. I mean, I think that's 100 by 60 mils channel. Then you've got a convex square edge welded on top of there, welded top and bottom. This is welded top and bottom. You've got another rubbing strip there, another rubbing strip here protecting this weld. I mean, these boats are, I've built sort of some seagoing Dutch barges, a trawler, all sorts of seagoing boats. The structure and the strength is probably less than even the narrow boats. They are built insanely strong. They are so far over the top, and the reason they're so over the top is to stop the corrosion. Nothing to do with the structural strength, really. They know that the base plate wears, so they stick a 10mm base plate on it rather than painting it properly. I could paint this, I could build these boats with 6mm bottom, no problem, shot blast it, epoxy it inside and out, and it'll last just as long. And it would bring the price down, to be fair, if people wanted that. You know, we possibly would have to put more ballast in, but you know, some of the yachts and stuff, the steel yachts, you know, they're built with sort of 4 or 5mm steel. It's just about painting them properly. If you want to use smaller section, then that's no problem. So again, I have no issues whatsoever guaranteeing our structural integrity and strength for the 7 years, the same as the epoxy. You know, I mean, I could say 10 years. I could say there's 60 by 60 6mm angle every 2 foot all the way down the boat. I mean, there's false floor we put in these boats. So not only have you got your rigid floor bearer, which is 80 by 66 mil, you've then got a 60 by 60 angle that goes across. So the strength of these boats are insane. I mean, if you come across a plastic boat and you hit a plastic boat with one of our boats, you know, you're not going to come off second best, that's for sure. The welds that we've looked at in previous videos, again, we're not going to go into every detail, but we structurally weld them on the inside, which again, you know, is going to take any knocks or any problems. People know what we do. They know we do it to a very high standard, and you know, we've not had to really warranty this, but you know, we have no issue with that. Inside, you know, I mean, there's so many things that are not to do with us. We have to buy in pumps, we have to buy in shower screens, you know, certain bits that are out of our control. And, you know, we don't really see why we should be warrantying other people's products and stuff. I know a lot of the engineering equipment, the Vita stuff we use, they've got extended year warranties, some have up to 5 years. But, you know, what I will say, you know, I mean, if a water pump was to fail, God, you know, 2 or 3 months after the bill, the warranties run out, you know, we're more than happy to come and have a look and change it or whatever. Because at the end of the day, we want to make sure that that's not going to keep reoccurring in case there's an issue or a problem. So we have no issues dealing with warranty work or whatever afterwards. But, you know, like anybody would, you know, if we've got to come out to London or somewhere to go and check the boat and make sure, you know, we would have to charge for coming out, you know. I think that's pretty normal and standard to most things, you know. We are always at the end of the phone, but this is why we'd rather spend the time and why I wouldn't let this boat go out before Christmas, to make sure that it's correct before it leaves. Because we can deal with things quite easily while they're on site. When, like I say, you know, the boat could be in London or up north, or, you know, it's not that easy to deal with. So, you know, it's important that, you know, that time scale is spent and the time is spent before it leaves, making sure it's okay, making sure it's tested, making sure everything's working. And we would rather spend the time then than we would going out afterwards chasing boats around the country. So yeah, even like the fenders on this boat, you know, the customer wanted some Pacific fendering made, but obviously, you know, that's one of the last things that goes on, but the brackets and that need to go on one of the first things. So again, you've got to discuss it with the guy who makes the fenders to make sure that, you know, we put these brackets on the right places, because we don't want to be welding stuff on at the end when it's all nicely epoxied and painted. So, you know, it's little touches like this that take the time and effort, and, you know, I mean, who thinks about a fender right at the start of the build? But if we didn't, and we didn't get these brackets in the right place, then all of a sudden, you know, and again, every boat's slightly different. You know, we have done this design a few times, so hopefully next time, you know, if somebody wants something like this. But that is, again, the emphasis on the customer, to think about these things at the start, you know. I mean, so many people come to you at the end and, oh, can you do this and do that? Once you damage this paint system, once it's all done and painted nicely and you start grinding and welding and stuff on, you know, that is where you've lost that key. And that is where you'll get corrosion and issues. So, you know, once we've put that coating on, you know, I won't budge from it and start welding stuff on. And that was the same, like I explained earlier, why we ended up putting that stainless steel strip. We normally find a way around it for the customer, but we won't start welding on top of the epoxy. Once that boat's the steelwork's finished, we've shot blasted it, we've epoxied it, that's it. That's sealed that whole boat up, and, you know, we're not going to break that, because that's where you do get problems with paint.
And there you go, that's Ruby Fizz Blue Water Boats. Hope you found this video useful, informative. If you did, drop it a like, drop it a comment, and don't forget to subscribe to the channel. Thanks for watching. See you next time.